Alright, so after I did my first episode of this, I actually really enjoyed it. And I watched it through and I figured out some things that I wanted to work on. First of all, I noticed that I had about 70 or so ums, buts, likes, and you knows, any sort of filler words that were absolutely not necessary. And I'm going to try to limit those down to a minimum as much as possible. My goal basically is just to get less than I did last time. So I'm going to try and go for about an hour yet again today. And I'm just going to try and get at least less than 70, and I'm aiming more for the 40s in that area. I think that's a very reasonable goal. And if I don't reach it, that's fine, just as long as it's less than what I had last time. I also noticed that I looked around a lot, which I didn't know I was going to do. I definitely knew I was going to do that because I absolutely love looking around whenever I'm trying to think, especially in the air. I really like looking at the ceiling whenever I'm really trying to think about what I want to say. I look pretty stiff at certain times, but I believe I can work on that, and I think that'll come naturally as I flow more into the rhythm of talking like this. And the last thing I just wanted to mention was I messed up my words 11 times, and I don't think that's a very significant thing over the course of an entire hour. I think it's very likely that you're going to mess up words very often whenever you're doing this much extroverted thinking, whenever you're trying to explain what you're thinking. And I suppose we can get started. So, compared to the first episode, I was talking more about myself, and I did notice that whenever I was talking about myself, I made a lot more mistakes, and I didn't know where I was going with things half the time. Because I said it from the beginning, I'm not very interested in myself, I'm not very interested in what I've done, because that's already past. I want to see what the future holds for me. And so I want to talk more today compared to last time. I want to talk about a specific problem. And I thought about which problem I wanted to think about and I wanted to talk about. And it was very difficult to decide which one I wanted to go to. But I believe I've decided, and I'm going to go with catastrophes. So, let's begin. What do I mean by catastrophes? Well, I don't mean catastrophes in the biological or, how would you say, environmental sense. I'm not talking about meteors coming down and crashing down on Earth or volcanic eruptions. I'm not talking about anything like that. When I talk about catastrophes, I'm talking about mistakes and giant issues people have in their lives. I'm talking about life issues, and I'm trying to pinpoint exactly where each of these catastrophes come from and how bad they can get and how you can overcome them. I've heard a lot from the psychology lessons that I've listened to. I've heard a lot of different information, a lot of different ideas on where the catastrophes come from and what you can do to avoid them to the best of your ability. And first of all, what I want to start this off with is the reason why I wanted to talk about catastrophes. And as I said, there were many other topics I could have chosen, but this was the one that particularly affects my life at this moment. And it's mainly because there's someone in my life that I realize this is affecting them, and I don't quite know how to articulate what exactly is going on. Because I don't fully know what's going on, but I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. So, let's talk about it. I'm going to first talk about the worst type of catastrophes and the ends it can lead to. And all of you probably at some point in your life have known someone like this. This type of person is someone who always seems to be trying their best, but everything seems to be going wrong for them. No matter how hard they seem to try, everything just keeps getting worse. It's like a snowball effect. One thing happens, and another thing happens, and another thing happens, and another thing happens, and it continues. It keeps going down that path. And you probably think to yourself, and I've thought about this as well, like, why? Why does this happen so much? Why can't they seem to get a grip on their life? Why can't they seem to figure out what's been going wrong and why can't they stop these catastrophes from happening. And it's not so obvious to me that they even know that these are catastrophes. It's been pointed out that some people may think that these catastrophes are just purely luck, that they're just coincidences. And partially that's true, because there's a lot of people that do have catastrophes in their life. No matter what, you're going to have ups and downs. And that's a really interesting thing that I learned, is life is chaos and order. You can't have order without chaos, and you can't have chaos without order. Because if you have too much order, then everything is perfect, and then what will happen is the biology of humanity is, if there's too much order, eventually we'll just run out of things to do. We'll be too satisfied with our lives, and so someone is going to test the waters, and they're going to do something that's going to be out of order because they're bored. That's what happens if life has too much order. And if life has too much chaos, then nothing gets done. Right now, our current society is headed into a trajectory of trying to obtain the best possible order, which is absolutely not a terrible thing, but there has to still be chaos, because otherwise we'll be so incredibly bored with our lives that we won't know what to do, and we're just gonna be completely lost in our directions. Because that's what I talked about last time, is that you need to have a direction in life. We're very pinpoint creatures, as I said. You need to know what you want to do, and whenever you know what you want to do, you tend to do very good at it if you're actually interested in it and you want to keep working on it. So if you have a goal in life, that's where positive emotion comes from. Positive emotion is mainly generated by the realization that you're headed towards a goal that you actually value. Because there can be goals that you have in life that you don't value. One of them, and a very big example of this, is school. Of course, there's a lot of teenagers that go through school and they absolutely hate it. And that's mainly because the school system isn't set up exactly how it should be. And there's a lot to dissect out of that, and I'll go a little bit into it. It's mainly that school systems go off of a grading system that absolutely cannot apply to every single personality type. I talked about the personality types last time. And specifically what we're talking about is conscientiousness and openness. As I said, conscientiousness and openness are the highest predictors of intellect. If you're either high in openness or high in conscientiousness, or both, then you're more likely to be high in intellect. And if you're low in intellect, and I believe I was wrong last time whenever I said this, I believe I said that IQ is not a good measurement of intellect. It actually is quite a good predictor and quite a good measurement of intellect. But it's not perfect. But where I was going with this is that if you're high in conscientiousness and high in openness, you're more likely to be highly intellectual, or just average. And if you're below average, and as I said before, if your IQ is about 85 or below, there's not many jobs opportunities for you out there. And that's one thing that our society has not figured out, is that people who are lower in IQ, that have an IQ lower than 85, probably aren't going to be able to get a job, because there's just nothing we can do with those people. And there's nothing wrong with them. It's the way that they're built, it's the way that their personality transformed, and there's no scientific way to improve your intellect, to improve your IQ. Now, there's ways to slow it down from going downwards, and actually one of the things that really interested me is that exercising. If someone exercises at least once in their life, their intellect and IQ is likely to go down at a much slower rate than otherwise. And by the way, fluid intelligence peaks at about 25 years of age, and then it just starts dropping massively. But if you, like I said, if you exercise at least once in your life, that honestly, it really makes a huge difference in the total drop in the steepness of that decline. But no matter what, everybody declines in intellect as they age, which is really weird to think of, because you think the longer that you're on this earth, the longer, or the higher that your intellect would go, but that's not the case. And so, if someone's low in intelligence and low in IQ, then there's no scientifically proven way to make that go up. We can only slow it down from going down. So any brain exercises that you may have seen, perhaps you've seen that there are some apps that you can download where you can actually do any sort of brain exercises. Those are not scientifically proven to work. Science for a long time in psychology has been trying to prove that to work, but there has been no successful demonstrations of that actually working. The only thing that we do know, as I said, is that exercise can slow the decline. From age 25, your fluid intelligence starts going down. And so people who are low in intellect tend to struggle in school, and that tends to be a catastrophe that a lot of young teenagers seem to go through, is that they don't understand why they seem to fail at this system. Why is it such an ingrained system and part of our society, yet a decent amount of them can fail at this system that we have built? Well, first of all, let's talk about what the system even is. The system is meant to make you get a job. That's the point of it. The point is not to manifest your greatest potential. The point is for you to get a job. It's to do just enough for you so that you're able to get a job. That's all the entire purpose of high school. University is a little bit different. You can go a little bit in your own direction, but high school, that's the point. It's just so that you can get a job and that you can sit in a straight line in a row and just listen and only ask questions whenever you need to get answers, and that's it. As I've said, asking questions is a very valuable life lesson that is not talked about in high school at all. It's only minorly mentioned, and I can even think about the classes that I've been in. It wasn't explicitly obvious that questions are actually that important. Of course, the teacher would say, ask questions if you're ever confused or anything like that, but really, that's in all of life. If you ever have questions, always ask, always wonder, always think. But people who are lower in openness often don't want to think, or don't think that thinking is worth thinking about. That's an interesting line to say there. And so all these people who are low in conscientiousness, low in openness, low in IQ, they go through high school, and I say low in IQ, but I even mean like even the average students. It's usually the valedictorians and anything that are in the above classes, in the academic classes. So at least in Canada, I'm not sure how it is in the U.S., but in Canada we have applied and we have academic. Academic is the highest level that you can take in high school, and then you have applied after that. And in university, of course, university is higher than college. That's, at least for the most part, how I understand how it works in Canada. And so the people who are low in openness, low in conscientiousness, and low in IQ, or even average in IQ, tend to think that school as an entirety is a catastrophe. Now, in some fundamental sense it is. And I've seen that a lot. I've seen that whenever I was in my math classes, particularly. I saw that people always thought, well, when am I going to ever use Pythagoras' theorem? And there was always something wrong with that. And I'm glad that I got the answer, because I never always knew the answer. Well, of course, it makes sense. We're never going to use these skills that we're learning in math class. But there's something wrong with that statement. And there absolutely is. Because whenever you take those math classes, you're actually learning a type of brain wiring that your brain really, really needs. It's a type of problem solving that is going to benefit you throughout life. It's not about all of the different equations that you learned or all the different mathematical formulas that you use to solve equations. It's mainly, and it's particularly about the problem solving skills that you use to get to the answers of those math problems. And that's what's so incredibly profound to me. Just how many people don't understand that, and how that's not being explained in schools either. They don't know the answers to that, because I've seen it. I've seen it in my math classes. People would ask questions, and they'd wonder, well, why should I be taking this math class? When am I going to use this in life further on? And the teacher can't answer that. And that's so incredibly amazing to me, how they can't answer that simple question. And of course, one of the other arguments would be, well, of course, if you want to pursue math, then you can at least test it out. But at least this is how it is in Canada. I believe it's 3 mandatory math classes. We have to take grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11 math, no matter what. I'm very big into math. As I said, interested in programming, so mathematics, of course, was something that was super interesting to me. And I did take water this time. Learned that from last time. Absolutely do not want to be talking for this long without any water. So yeah, so as I was saying about the math classes, the teachers just can't answer that question. And I didn't know why. Why wouldn't the teachers know the answer to the most obvious question that every student who even has slightly of a brain is going to ask? Even the ones lowest in IQ, I guarantee you, that's probably the one that it goes through their mind the most, is the one that are lowest in IQ, that are lowest in intellect. Those, and I hate saying lowest in intellect because it makes them sound stupid. And it's not that they're stupid, but in some sense, they're just not able to grasp the concepts as easily. But to a certain degree, they can, but some, of course, can't. If you're average in intelligence, you can definitely grasp any concept if you're given enough proper training for it. And if you're lower in IQ, then you probably can't grasp some certain topics. But it seems to be the ones that are slightly below average or average in IQ are the ones that are most disagreeable, and the ones that are always refuting the ideas of all these different classes that we have to take in high school. That was really, really interesting for me to see as I was watching and going through high school. As I said, I'm 18 years old and I recently just got out of high school, so I have fresh eyes in this. Seeing the most recent generation, which I suppose now there is one more generation that I haven't seen that's the most recent one now, but the most recent, most fresh generation I have seen entirely. And I hate to say this, but it definitely does seem that the majority were not interested in any sort of academic work, or at least they didn't care enough to wonder about it. And I'm not sure if that's normal. I don't know that for a fact. But it definitely was a little bit hurting to know that my generation just doesn't seem as interested in all of these interesting concepts as perhaps what other generations may have been. But yet again, I don't know that for a fact. Perhaps other generations were also not interested in these types of interesting topics to talk about. But then again, maybe it's just because the school system doesn't teach them properly. As I said, my teacher Kevin from high school, my religion teacher, absolutely amazing person. And actually I'm going to be visiting him very soon, and I'm very excited for that. We're going to have a good conversation, hopefully about the new things in each other's lives, and talk about some of the topics that I've been thinking about and I've been wanting to talk about. And hopefully through this I'll also be able to convey myself a little better than what I have in the past, because I've noticed that I'm not very good at conveying myself, but I feel like I'm feeling very confident and getting a lot better at conveying myself. So let's jump back on track. Let's go back to catastrophes. You've seen this person in your life that has absolutely terrible, consistent catastrophes in their life. One thing after another, they just can't seem to catch a break. And as I've said, I know someone in my life that has that very similar lifestyle. And it's usually attached with impulsiveness. That's the main thing. Although I can't really pinpoint where it went wrong. And that's what I've bit my tongue so hard on it, because I can't seem to properly articulate or even figure out where the hell it all went wrong in the beginning. It's a very difficult topic to discuss. But how do you avoid these catastrophes? Well, you can't avoid them. That's the thing with life, is that no matter what, there's catastrophes in life. And there's anxieties, and there's depressions, and there's suicidal thoughts. There's all these very highly negative emotions, which is partly narcissism, but I learned narcissism also has to do with wanting to bring out the worst of others, wanting to take the bad out of everything rather than the good. So if you're really, really narcissistic, really, really narcissistic people are going to try and find the worst out of every situation. Those are the glass half empty type of people, and you want to avoid those people at all costs to the best of your ability. Because of course, if you're going to have negativity in your life, it's just going to manifest, and there's no way you can change those people. There's absolutely no way. You know how hard it is already to change yourself. Think about changing someone else. That's one thing that I learned in my psychology lectures, is that you should get your own life in order first. And then you should try and help others. But it's hard enough to get your own life in order first. That's what I'm trying to work on. I'm trying to just figure out my life, trying to figure out what I can do, where I want to go, how I want to do it, why, my whys, those are always so important. Those are the most important questions to ask. Why do you want to do something? I always ask myself, well, why am I doing this right now? Well, I have what I believe is a pretty good answer. It's because I want to develop my articulation skills so that I'm better at writing essays, so that I'm better at explaining my points of views on very serious topics and even less serious topics, but most importantly, serious topics. So the people with a lot of catastrophes in their life, they don't know what to do. And as I've said, I don't know where, for this particular person in my life, where it started. And I don't know why it started. And I'm trying to figure that out. But I'm also not super focused on it. Because of course it's not my life, it's someone else's life. They got to deal with their own problems, of course. But it's just interesting to me just to think about it from a psychological point of view. What decisions could have been put into place that caused more catastrophes? And that's where I want to go with this. In life, everything is catastrophic. You're guaranteed to die. That's the thing. In life, it's an all-in game. There's no 50-50, there's no putting 80% effort. You gotta go all in. Because if you don't go all in life, then what the hell are you doing? Because there's no point if you're not gonna go all in. Because you're all in anyways. That's what life is. You're gonna die someday. That's 100% certainty. Without any denial whatsoever, you are going to die. And it's a shock. This is one thing that really actually I learned very recently that really blew my mind. It's amazing that everybody doesn't have anxiety disorders and aren't seriously depressed, because that's the simple truth of life, is everybody's going to die with 100% certainty, and you don't know when. So it's an absolute amazement at how humans aren't already just filled with anxiety as it is, which it's a great thing to see. It's a good thing that a lot of people aren't, but obviously some people are, for many different reasons, and it's very complex reasons. And I don't have nearly enough experiences talking to those type of people and understanding those types of people to have any sort of opinion on this whatsoever. All I know is, as I said, I've been listening to Jordan Peterson. All I know is what he said, and I believe what he said because he has a lot of experience, as I said, 25 years as a clinical psychologist. That's a lot of time to get a lot of information. One thing I always try to do is try and learn from everybody and everything that I do at any moment, because you can learn anything at any time from anyone. And if you listen, you really pay attention to the person, you will not believe what they will tell you. You will learn everything about them if you just listen and ask the proper questions. Because people love talking about themselves. But I won't go too deep into that. I think that's a topic for another day. So, the people who have a lot of catastrophes in their life clearly must either just have really bad luck or have made really bad decisions. And it's not obvious to me which one it is yet. I've come to a conclusion myself that success in life is determined by 3 factors, and one of them is mandatory. One of them is happiness. This is something I've never actually told anyone before. It's something that I thought of whenever I was about 17, and I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I can't really seem to see any other explanation for success, because it seems to be the most rudimentary, the most obvious answer possible. So, there's 3 factors to success, which is happiness, hard work, and luck. Those are the only 3 factors. And what it seems to me is that if you're not happy with what you're doing, you can't be successful no matter what. No matter how hard you work, if you aren't happy about it, you're never going to be successful. So happiness is a absolute must factor. And then the other thing is hard work. Hard work is not mandatory, but I believe it obviously helps a lot, as you'd know. You'd know, especially if you've worked a lot on any sort of university projects, on any sort of personal projects, anything like that. You know hard work really pays off. And if you're enjoying what you're doing, it pays off even more. It's like exponential. Because that's how it was described to me. Is that either you either go like this and you have exponential curve upwards to where you're going towards your goals in an exponential curve and it's really going up at a fast rate, or you're on the other end and you're experiencing negative emotion and it goes down exponentially and it goes down really fast. And those are the people that just keep having bad things happening in their life. And it's not obvious to me yet why. And that's what I keep trying to figure out, and it seems like something that we can't seem to figure out. I listen as much as I can to Jordan Peterson, and he has not yet answered that question. If I ever have the chance, I'd like to ask him, why do these catastrophes snowball? So the three factors that I found for success seem to be hard work, happiness, and luck. And as I said, happiness has to be mandatory because otherwise you're just on a downward curve. You can't see someone who is unhappy with their life and successful. It just doesn't make sense because the definition of success is being satisfied with your current position in life. That's at least my definition. You got to be satisfied with where you are in life. If you aren't satisfied with where you are, how can that be successful? And so the other factor is luck. And luck is a really weird one because I don't necessarily mean someone winning the lottery, because I think winning the lottery actually doesn't do anything at all. Because it's been seen quite a few times, I've at least heard these stories, that people who win lotteries usually are in a worse place, about the same, or in about a couple months, they lose all their money and go back to exactly where they were. There's no long-term success. It's only short-term success whenever you win that lottery ticket. So I don't mean luck in that sense. What I mean by luck is the people that you encounter. Because there's a lot of people in the world. And if you meet the wrong people, you can be sent in a downward trajectory really fast, especially if you get attached to them. You can just meet a bad person, and then you have a really bad day, especially if they hurt you, and they're cynical and they're manipulative. And so that would be an example of bad luck. You couldn't, to a certain extent, you couldn't control, if you're naive, you couldn't control the people that you met or how you dealt with them. Because if you're naive, you're going to think that, of course, you're going to trust everyone, you're going to think everyone's fine, and you're not going to notice what they're doing to you mentally and psychologically in your subconscious until way later in life. And that's where the snowball effect of catastrophes comes in. And that's where I think I'm getting to. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is just how far back does this go where these snowball effect of catastrophes first started. And it had to have been something like they met the wrong person that affected their life at the wrong time. And they didn't know it was happening either. That's a really big thing. So I'm very careful with who I talk to, with who I become friends with. I have very little friends. I keep only the close ones, and I have fantastic close ones, and I treasure them because I know high quality people whenever I see them. And that's a really good test actually. Whenever you want to see if someone's actually your friend, and you tell them good news. And if you tell them good news and they're happy for you, they're a good friend. If you tell them good news and they're jealous for you, or you can see some resentment or some envy or anything like that, they're bad friends. Because they don't want to see you succeed. A good friend always wants to see you succeed. And the reverse of that is if you tell a friend bad news. If you tell a friend bad news, you'll know they're a friend because they're just going to console you, they're going to listen to you, and they're not going to tell you anything about what happened in their life. If you have a bad friend, what they're going to do whenever you tell them bad news is they're going to tell you something worse that happened to them. That's manipulation. And that's something a lot of people don't realize, and I realized this about a year ago, I'd say, and I'm very happy that I did. Luckily, I never really had to deal with anything like that because who knows how my life could have turned out instead. But I'd say so far it's going well, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes because I don't know how it's going to go, but we'll see. And so that's That's really something to think about, is how to determine who's your friend and who isn't. So, now let's go back on the different decisions that people with these snowball effects of catastrophes could have made. Well, as I said, in life, it's filled with catastrophes. Every decision you make has catastrophes. What I mean by catastrophes is things can still go wrong. The point of your decision is to figure out the path with the least amount of wrongs. And sometimes you'll be wrong, and of course, but you also don't want to make regrets either. That's where it's kind of tricky to determine the difference between, well, this is the path I think I want to take, but it has catastrophes. Well, this is a path that I think I want to avoid, but I might want to try, but also has catastrophes. I think the most important thing to consider in any decision, no matter what, no matter how much you may regret not trying it later on, I think that you just want to avoid the path with the most catastrophes. Which path leads to the least amount of destruction in your life? And it's not so obvious sometimes which path that is, and sometimes you do need to take risks. That's absolutely something that just occurs. That's part of human life. You need to make sacrifices. You need to sacrifice your time. You need to sacrifice friends. You need to sacrifice family sometimes. It all depends. And especially family, and that's one that not a lot of people want to accept. Because that's a really tough one, because it's your family. It's the most core element of your being. And you're going to sacrifice that. If it's bringing you in a downward trajectory, you have to. Because otherwise, the implications and the consequences of not sacrificing that family and getting away from them is that you're going to go down with them. That's a really good piece of advice that I learned. Is that a good person can't bring a bad person up, but a bad person can bring a good person down. Just think about that. That is absolutely amazing, an amazing piece of advice that I'm so glad that I heard. Because of course, like I said, you can't change people. You already know how hard it is to change yourself. And then think about how hard it is to change others, of course. You think it's easy, it's not, because you know it's not easy to change yourself. Think about how hard it is to change your family. That's even more difficult. Think about how hard it is to change your friends. That's already nearly impossible if you haven't even gotten yourself figured out. And then think about how hard it is to change your community and then the entire world. If you can't even figure out about how to change yourself for the better, how the hell are you going to be able to change the entire world? Those two just do not correspond to me at all. Those two are absolutely impossible. So each decision in life is filled with catastrophes. And so your goal is just to figure out which one leads to the least amount of catastrophes. And it's not going to be obvious. And like I said, you're going to need to take risks. And risks come in many forms. And you just need to understand that life is an all-in game. So if you have a risk you need to take it, no matter what. Because you're all in anyways, you may as well go all in on the risk. If you're just going to stay stagnant, you're actually going behind. Because think about it. Because some people just don't make decisions because they have decision paralysis, and that's a very serious thing. And a very common example of this is something very simple. If you're going to buy nice clothes or any sort of clothing for that matter, and there's so many options, people will often not make a decision because of decision paralysis. There's too many options. And that is applicable throughout all of life. Sometimes you don't make a decision, and sometimes it costs you a lot more than it would be to make a decision. I think of a good example. Elon Musk had the choice between gambling all of his money, all of his interest onto, I believe it was SpaceX. It was either SpaceX or Tesla. No, he had the opportunity to choose between SpaceX or Tesla, or they would both most likely die. But he chose to take the risk and to choose both of them, and it worked out for him tremendously. And now look at him. That's a perfect example of what taking risk and the benefits of taking risks are in life. It's really, really something that is not explained to you at all anywhere in life, unless if you go and search for it. That's the people in openness that tend to find those answers. Because people low in openness often don't want to know the answers to those questions. Either they don't want to know the answers to those questions, or they've never even asked those questions to begin with. They don't want to know what it's like to change, which is, that's a really tough one to think about, because openness is a personality trait. And if you're low in openness, what can you do about that? And I'm not so sure, I'm not certain if there's any way to change the structure of your brain and your ideas to where you're able to actually change your mindset from not being very open to being more open-minded. I have absolutely no idea if we're capable of doing that, or if it's hardwired into us to where anyone who is not open-minded will stay not open-minded, and anybody who is open-minded will stay open-minded. Because I think about that in comparison to intellect. And intellect, as I said, it can't go up. We have no scientific proof that can show that we can definitely, without any deniable proof at all, that we can definitely make intellect go up. We have no proof of that. So I think about that in regards of your personality. Well, if someone's really narcissistic, is there any way that we can bring them down? And I don't know the answer to that. And I want to say partially, but it has to be done minimally and carefully. You don't want to do too much at a time, because that'll overwhelm the person way too much. And that's another catastrophe. That's a big catastrophe. Overwhelming someone to the point that they can't take it anymore. And people usually do that to themselves. So whenever I was talking about depression and suicide, those are serious topics, and they need to be addressed, and they need to be talked about. Is that most of the people who are depressed and suicidal think that there's absolutely no way out of their life. That's what it means. It means that they think that life itself would be better without them in it, because there's no possible way up. So, you could compare that to intellect. If there's no possible way to increase intellect, then is there a way to change a person's personality for the better? Change a person's personality for the better. I don't mean that in a manipulative way. And whenever I said that, I definitely could see how that would be taken as a manipulative way. I do not mean it at all like that. But there are definitely some characteristics of personality, I believe, that work against someone. And you can definitely show them tactics and training techniques that can make it easier for them. As I said, impulsiveness is is a category of a personality trait. I can't remember which one. It may be associated with extroversion, but I'm not sure. But impulsiveness is definitely, as I've said, a big one that contributes to long-term failure. Those are the people that are snowballing. So if they're associated with bad people, they'll be very impulsive. And if you're also an impulsive person, then it just works out really bad for you. Because you don't even realize what's happening to you. You don't even realize what these people are doing to you. They're completely destroying your past, present, and future. And that's really something to think about on its own. The past, the present, and the future. You have your current self. You have what you did that you can think about, and you can learn from, and you can learn from your mistakes. Because a mistake is not something you should regret, such that it's not so bad of a mistake that it ruins your entire future. So you have your past, you can learn from your mistakes. You have your present, where you can make your decisions, and your decisions impact your future self. And your future self, that's where the catastrophic self is, if you manifest it incorrectly. So the people who make the bad decisions now, today, let's just say something simple. Putting something off for tomorrow can completely alter your entire life. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. That can completely destroy your entire life. And I know you've probably heard this one many times. Is that next week becomes next week, and next week becomes next week, and then next week never comes. And then you're ruining your future self because you're not making any improvement. Because you're not making a decision, you're staying still. And what does it mean to stay still? It means to fall backwards. Because in life, that's something that's just a harsh reality, is that there is no such thing as standing still. Because time still goes by. That's a rough one. You can't stand still and just pause time. Oh, let's just take a break. Let's just figure things out. No. You gotta make decisions. Because more often than not making a decision is gonna be the worst possible decision. You gotta take risks. And you gotta understand that taking risks is a part of life. You gotta understand the consequences of all of the things that you decide to do. And that's not easy for a lot of people to visualize. They don't know what it means to think ahead. Because they've never envisioned it. They've never even thought of it because they're low in openness. And that's just really, really tragic. That's how lives are ruined. So I'm gonna keep going on about this, but I'm gonna take it from a different direction now. Someone who's really successful now. So before I was talking about someone who had a snowball effect of catastrophes. And the best possible way that I can assume that they got there is because they started making bad decisions right from the beginning. And that affected every single stage of their life up until where they are now. And most of the time it's not luck. It's not just, oh, unfortunate event, unfortunate event, unfortunate event. Most of the time it's probably not that. It's probably because they made bad decisions or no decision whatsoever. And it's not necessarily their fault because they didn't even realize it was happening because they were too damn naive to realize it was happening. And that breaks minds. That just ruins hearts. I don't quite know how to process that. I don't quite know how to bring that up to someone. I've been trying to figure that out. It's the position that they put themselves in. And that's not what people want to hear. The one thing that I do know is that if you do ever seriously need to bring this up to someone, otherwise it will completely destroy their life beyond recoverability. If you really need to bring something up to someone, you tell it to them carefully, and you gotta push away their emotions because it's something serious that they gotta hear. And a lot of people, of course, are emotional. You have to feel empathy for them. You have to understand where they're coming from. You have to understand that there's going to be a lot of rage. There's going to be a lot of strong emotions because they're not going to like what you're going to say because you're going to be honest with them. And honesty is usually pretty brutal. But if you can push away the tears and the sadness, you can get around the anger, and you can get straight to them and finally have a real conversation with them about why this is happening to them, then maybe they'll listen. And that's just a maybe, because you can't change people. And that's another thing. Anytime with addictions, of course, someone you love, you don't want them to have an addiction. Smoking, alcohol, gambling, anything of the sort. Having addictions like that, even social media. Social media is a big addiction. You don't want them to have any sort of addictions like that. But if you bring it up to them, often that makes things worse. And the reason why I say that, and I've learned this, mainly from all of the lectures that I've listened to and all of the accumulative knowledge that I've gained, is that people often, very often, know what they're doing is wrong. You telling them does absolutely nothing. They know what they're doing, but it's an addiction. And you can try to offer to help them, but it's not always going to work. And that's there's nothing you can do about that. You just gotta trust, knowing that it could absolutely go wrong. You still have to trust that maybe they'll try something. because you bringing it up is probably going to make it worse. Because they already know what they're doing. They already know what they're doing. So now I'm going to take a different perspective, as I said, and I'm going to go into the positive side. The people who go through these catastrophes, but actually had a positive outcome from them. Well, these are the people who make the decisions. These are the people who understand the catastrophes. They're not naive. They're not naive. That's the big one. They understand the catastrophes. They understand each path that they can take. They understand the possible consequence and the possible benefits of each of them. And they try to find the one with the least possible catastrophes, but one that still moves them forward. And that's another thing, is that you still have to choose a path that moves you forward. A lot of people are stuck in a path that moves them neither forward nor backwards, but they still choose a path, but it's not necessarily in the direction they want to go. And I can give you an example. If they have a job that they are absolutely resenting, and they've been resenting it for a very long time, but they know they have to keep this job, otherwise they're not going to be able to pay their bills, they're not going to be able to provide for their family. What do you do in that situation? And the best answer that I can give to that is make sure you're at least moving towards a goal that will get you out of that situation. But most people, what they do is just accept their fate. But fate is not, my belief is that fate is not deterministic. We all have free will, we all have free choice to do what we want. But most people who are in positions like that, or positions where they enjoy their job, they play video games, they binge watch movies, binge watch TV shows. They make absolutely no progress towards a goal, and their life becomes static and slowly moving backwards due to time. That's another, how would I say, a sin. And I'm going to explain to you what sin means exactly. So first of all, sin is, if I'm not mistaken, a Greek word. I'm almost certain it's a Greek word. And it means to miss the mark, to miss the bullseye. And that's exactly what you'd be doing if you're not making a decision that moves you forward in life and gets you further than where you want to be. That's a sin. So it's not necessarily some sort of act against God or anything like that. I'm not here to preach for you. I won't even go into religious topics or anything like that, because that's a whole different story. But I believe sin is the best possible word to describe this. So it's a sin to make a decision that doesn't move you at all forward in life, but doesn't move you at all backwards, because you're missing the mark. Yes, you're not going backwards, but you still are, and you're definitely not moving forwards. You need to go forward. You need to push on. You need to keep pursuing your goals. You need to have goals. You need to know how to set goals. You need to know how to ask questions. You need to know how to negotiate. Those are such important life lessons that virtually nobody is taught. University especially does a terrible job apparently at this. A lot of young students have absolutely no idea what their goals are, what their ambitions are in life, because they were never guided at all. They have no idea where they want to go, because they were never shown any sort of skills to lead them forward. Because setting goals is not simply thinking about what you want to do. Setting goals is actually writing them down physically and looking at them every day and slowly moving towards it. Not quickly, slowly. 10% at a time, 1% at a time, even 0.5%, 0.25%, 0.1% at a time. It's not going to be overnight, and you see that with exercise. Anybody who exercises, I believe at least half of the people who try to exercise eventually give up and fail because they're not committed long term. They don't understand what it means to be committed long term. But what it means to be committed long term is to have discipline. And discipline is what can avoid catastrophes in your life. If you're consistently doing something every day that moves you forward, you're gonna have a really, really nice life. But you gotta know how to set goals. And you can't just say, well, this is what I want to do. You have to know exactly different stages that you know are attainable. This is a really great quote that I've heard. I can't remember who said it. But the goal in life is to make a substantial amount of progress in a reasonable amount of time. So you want to set the goal to where it's a substantial amount of progress in a reasonable amount of time. Substantial. We're going to dissect that just a little bit. What I mean by substantial is whatever you define as substantial, because substantial is completely different for everybody. Everybody moves at different rates, and you got to know your rate. And how do you know your rate? You got to try. You got to test. You got to experiment. You got to see what you can do. You got to see what you can't do. And if you can't do it, you need to figure out how you can start doing it. Because if you just avoid everything that you can't do, then how are you going to move forward? There are a lot of things that I know I can't do. And there are some things that I know I can do. But one thing's for sure is I know I can learn anything that I want to learn. I know I'm confident in myself. I have enough trust in myself to know that if I needed to do something, if I needed to learn something, that I could do it. And that's what a lot of people need to understand. They need to know what it means to have confidence in yourself. And that's how you avoid catastrophes. That's how you move forward in life. That's how you fight the dragons in your path. That's how you orient yourself to make your life and the life of others around you a lot better. And with that, thank you for watching.